Welcome, all of you. I hope that you've had an interesting time listening to us, and I hope that you tell everyone about this new YouTube exposure of David Duval and Jack Cole speaking together every week when we do get together, and no rehearsals, no topics, just the way we usually talk, which to me has great results. Thank you so much, always, Jack, for taking the train in.
Oh, thank you, David. I love my train rides.
I know you do.
What's coming.
I know you work on your journals,
I
and
do.
knowing you, everything you see is part of your life. That's for sure.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to open today's No Art, No Life, No Life, No Art. Everything is interrelated. And I want your opinion on this.
Okay. What is this?
This is a paragraph used in a book of 20th century music and introduction. And it's by Gertrude Stein. And see what you think of this, because it goes against the usual thinking about the 20th century. And I don't know when she wrote this. I know she died around 1946 or so. But here she goes, Gertrude Stein. The 20th century is more splendid than the 19th century. Certainly, it is much more splendid. That's her. The 20th century has much less reasonableness in its existence than the 19th century. But reasonableness does not make for splendor. The 17th century had less reason in its existence than the 16th century, and in consequence, it has more splendor. So the 20th century is that it is a time when everything cracks, where everything is destroyed, everything isolates itself. It is a more splendid thing than a period where everything follows itself. So then, the 20th century is a splendid period, not a reasonable one in the scientific sense, but splendid. The phenomena of nature are more splendid than the daily events of nature, certainly so than the 20th century is splendid. Can you make anything of it?
What's the first thing that I'm thinking of is a question. When in the 20th century did she write that?
That's the first thing I also wanted to know. It was probably around 1920, at the peak of her own fame in Paris with the American expatriates that were there, looking at her and seeing all of her new Picassos and Braques and so forth. She had a great influence on the Americans that time. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, they all wanted to meet her, and they did. So I wish I did. I tried to track it down, but no. I don't think this was written after Hiroshima.
That's what I was wondering. I'm wrestling with a book called The Great Chain of Being by Arthur Lovejoy. And it's a long, careful study that begins with ideas that Plato and Aristotle put in motion about the idea of plenitude and whether or not a creator, in creating all the possible things that can be created, is then compelled, if I understand loosely so far, is compelled to create things that are also, by our perception, evil, in order to create a comprehensive and complete world. And yet, short of discrediting the creator, because of those things, the argument is still there that perhaps we still live in the best of possible worlds. So I'm wondering if, notwithstanding the fact that we hadn't reached the Second World War with that, she'd also seen what the First World War, and we imagine she's writing in France, where that would have been close hard by in terms of trenches and all sorts of awful things with gas masks and man's inhumanity to man.
She and her companion, Topaz, they left their apartment in Paris to live in a small little town in France.
So I guess my question is, do you think she's wrestling there with the idea that notwithstanding all of the things that she already knows about the 20th century, that it's still more splendid, with the idea that a real comprehensive perception of the cosmos is that it's going to include some of the ugliest things that we can imagine, but it doesn't, in the long run, temper a real deep artist's perception of how great the conception of the cosmos is. Do you think that's what she's saying?
I think she's trying to get at that, yes.
Okay.
In her, she would never say convoluted prose, but yes, so then the 20th century is a splendid period. Not a reasonable one in the scientific sense. So she knows that the tank had been invented by 1915 and was causing havoc on the battlefields of World War One. And yet, when I read this, I really, like, what? Who in the hell ever thinks the 20th century, if we're talking to someone personally on the phone or on the street or anywhere, thinks that the 20th century was as profuse and prolific and sprouting as was the 19th century, which, you know, was just an age of so many wondrous new inventions that they loved, as well as an age of definitely culminating in art.
Do you think, as a pianist, and as a mutual pianist, do you think we have that prejudice in favor of the 19th century because of the piano in particular?
Yes, yes. There's no doubt we don't know anything about Anton Rubinstein's playing or Liszt. We surmise it from the best ears of the day that Chopin was an exquisite pianist, but we certainly can't go to the phonograph and put on his own recording of any of his music or Liszt or anyone else's. Remember, they did not, because life was a real completion then compared to us. They didn't they didn't fool around. They composed and played. The idea of not composing was not possible until the 20th century, and the idea that maybe they can be immortal through recording. So what happened, of course, with the machine is that there was a great switch in the new performers. Today, if you asked so-and-so, no matter how well known he is as a pianist, do you compose? He would look at you askance. No, he doesn't compose. Well, you wouldn't say to Rachmaninoff, do you compose? No, if he didn't compose, he was sad. Practicing the piano was his way of making a living, and he loved it. But he worked so hard at it that there were some very terrible fallow years for him. I don't know what to say about that problem, but no doubt about it that the 19th century for you and I as a pianist is a golden age.
But I suspect for you as an artist, or hearing you generalize, that you don't quite agree with Stein. So to answer what you said was your first question to me, what do I get from that? I'm surmising she has that wild urge to take a risk to say that we do live in the best of all possible worlds,
yes,
notwithstanding any circumstances. I'm reminded of a phrase that I always thrill to, and I remember when I cite it, other people raise their eyebrows as if they think it's awful. But I know that William James was present during the San Francisco earthquake in the early 20th century. Mm-hmm. And presumably when he awakened to it and wasn't witness to all of the death and destruction, his first reaction when it was over was, as if he was speaking to the creator of the cosmos, go it more. He was willing to see, no matter what the consequences were, a cosmos that I imagine as a kind of creative spirit was always perhaps the best of all possible worlds, and that as an artist, or in his case a writer and a psychologist, whatever he was there to pay witness to was grand. I don't feel that as much from you.
No. I would like to feel that, because we would be going backward to a wonderful belief where God existed. We would say, oh my goodness, this God has done such great things, and it was God's will that we had that earthquake. But notice there was very few annotations about the world's tremendous explosions or so forth. There was a great one in 1886 or 7 or 5 that was like all over the world that happened in the Caribbean islands. Tremendous noise. There was
What kind of explosion do you mean?
a physical
A geological
yes,
event?
a geological
Oh,
explosion.
okay.
There was not very many. There was Voltaire's famous earthquake in Lisbon, where he started saying "crush the infamy," which was to him the Catholic Church, and how they were working their way through the earthquake. People that were killed, a man in Calais and so forth. He was, very, very. I think the man who said this is the best of all possible worlds is in Voltaire's own writing, in his own Candide, right?
I think so.
So I think she's going back into a time where we all miss the God. Let's face it. There's whatever that's called, the creative spirit, or Wagner said God is Beethoven or Bach. But we're alone. We're so alone. We don't like any longer, because the media has destroyed the impact of the world's disastrous nature. Nature's disastrous to human beings. Every minute there's more tornadoes in America than in any country, things like that. When will New York overflow its banks?
But hasn't nature always presented that to us?
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
I don't think that people liked, they didn't like to even talk about the first big news event of tragedy, the Titanic. It was, it was so fantastic that it's gone through the whole century. We still watch documentaries on it, but it was during that time, it was like a no-no. Oh my God, this is so horrible.
because it was sacrilegious to talk about the death of people for...
The death of people from a machine, from a...
And yet, don't you think the reason that we still have a fascination for it is because there's a latent reassurance that we cannot conquer nature?
That's absolutely right. It's important.
So that when we see this ship sink, however the movie may try to make us feel for a lost romantic couple, what actually is there is a kind of reassuring factor that we can build this, titanic machine, but it's not going to stop the hand of God or whatever the first principle is that puts all of this in motion, just like it couldn't in any way say that to the dinosaurs, we're going to stop you and select some other alternative future for the Earth.
Right.
So I'm wondering if Stein is stepping back and saying whether or not I'm a dinosaur eradicated by an asteroid, or, as terrible as this may sound, witness to terrible atrocities in the 20th century, I will still rejoice as a witness that I was here. That's kind of what I got from that.
Well, I think that's what she wanted.
Okay.
And I was reading it in hoping that that's what you would feel, because I feel that, you have that kind of optimism that I don't have.
But,
and I don't like going back in time. I like the way Liz said, first to the living.
Yes.
When it was already people were starting to play from the past only. But yes, it's an amazing piece of writing, isn't it?
But that's a conundrum. I was attracted to your work as a student and hearing you on the radio, feeling that you characterized what could be as agent in the present, even if it maybe seemed to others, I don't think anyone necessarily says this, but I think maybe you're even suggesting that you might be more comfortable in another time. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I wouldn't understand another time at all, because if you read a great deal, you find yourself within the plot, and you have to readjust yourself. I am more comfortable as being a 20th century man into the 21st. I don't understand anything except what the news items are, and that we have invented machines that can wipe out cities, and we've firebombed Tokyo, and 100,000 people are dead in a minute, or 70,000 in 7 seconds after the atomic bomb. I think that's the central central climax of the mid-century of the 20th century, and afterward we just go into a doldrum. I don't think we have any great composers outside of the maybe few, and they're not played. You don't know anything of Stravinsky's most important works. It's still always the same three ballets.
And I often wonder if that's also part of a general human limitation, including a limitation I have.
Mm-hmm.
I always admired the Bernstein unanswered question lectures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've been through
Yes,
those.
yes, I don't remember.
And yet,
all
forgive
of
me,
them.
I'm going to sound like a real trite twit, but I'm always disappointed that the apotheosis of the whole series of lectures is the Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex. Because I think his argument is, if you remember the series of lectures, I think is it Blake that he quotes, that the poetry of earth is ceasing never, and so we always have to go back to the overtone series and all the things that will affect tonality, and that what he argues in the end is that Stravinsky rejuvenates what is the poetry of earth by reapplying different rhythmic aspects to it. And yet I always feel a degree of disappointment, and I don't know if that's simply because I'm a romantic, and that I always have a smile when I watch the film The Bandwagon. If you remember the very beginning, when they have what is clearly a parody of Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex in the movie, and yet to a degree they defend it because that's when they move into the song That's Entertainment.
Oh yes, yes.
And yet, so how do you account for my disappointment? I wish I could feel that.
Well, I don't think he went far enough. You know, Stravinsky, Oedipus Rex is in the late 30s or into 40s?
I'm not sure.
Well, that's important because it's not until like 1947, 50 that Robert Kraft introduces him to the music of Webern, Stravinsky. And these last works of his, from like 55 till he dies in whatever, 71, 4, or earlier, these are the great interesting works to me, where he has taken Webern's tremendous talent and the silences that are so inherent in Webern's music, far different than the romantic atonality or even 12-tone operas of Berg, and he takes into almost miniatures, 7-minute pieces, 6-minute, 4 minutes.
Webern.
He takes Webern and he now Stravinskyizes him and makes him much more livable for people to listen to. It's fantastic music, and no one knows this greatest of old age music.
You mean when Stravinsky takes up serialism?
When he takes up serialism, it's a very important moment where he is a man who's, like Bernstein, always pushing tonalities, you know, where here is Stravinsky finally saying, okay, they're right. I don't know why it didn't come to me. I didn't have the time. I still had a lot of stuff to compose in the tonal world, his tonal world, because he's a great master. But now he says, I will take Webern and I will Stravinskyize it.
Can you
And
give
he does that with religious music too. It's extraordinary stuff.
Could you cite for me pieces that you can listen to within that vein that you feel moved by, even if you didn't know what the argument was made in the music to distinguish it from systems that preceded it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you drop the needle on something like that for a child?
Yeah, very easily. I could drop the needle on all of those pieces, from the death of Kennedy to you name these. I can't right now. The titles don't come to mind because so many others are so, impressed in my mind. But anytime I hear him, I'm seeing the great vision of an old man, still highly creative. Eros is moving in him. And he's modest enough to say, okay, me was the opposite of Schoenberg and his two boys. They were his alter egos. I mean, he didn't have time, Schoenberg, after he invented the 12-tone method to
when you say Schoenberg's two boys, you mean Berg
and Webern. Those are his two
okay.
boys.
Mm-hmm.
the Opus 1 Piano Sonata on Berg is definitely marvelous, beautiful work of late Romanticism. It's a Tristan-esque and so forth. It's depressing, and B minor is the but it's not yet 12 tone because he didn't invent it yet, Schoenberg. But the moment they did, both boys never again composed anything that was not in the 12 tone method.
And when you say boys, you mean by that a expression that they are his disciples?
They're his psyche.
I
He didn't have time to go into Wozzeck, Lenlulu.
I see.
He certainly had even a greater vision in Moses and Aaron, the opera that's unfinished. Fantastic stuff. All of late Schoenberg's, but no one ever else competed. And he actually, if you wanted to say so, I wouldn't disagree with you. He took many of those hundreds of students from even pop stars like Oscar Levant who studied with them, and he took them down the wrong path. There's not one piece outside of the Berg, Webern, and Stravinsky in late music that exists. You hear anything of the tremendous school, because he got it into the university very quickly.
Well, it dominates the university.
It dominated it, and there was no music. You couldn't write a tune. You were not allowed to.
And yet there's no result now.
No
maybe
result.
That's just my childish impression, but
No. If you studied composition with him, unless you were a Berg or a Webern, you would absolutely have gone down the wrong path.
So do you think?
Only he and his two boys.
So the system's kind of moved. It's just an appendage to a talent that he perhaps had.
Yes, that's the most important thing you could possibly say about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a movement. It was not nobody could take that path.
Yes.
It was an appendage to his talent and the madness that he had, that he was not born at the right time, that he could continue the great composer's work. Bach, because he thought of himself as,
In their line of descent.
Absolutely.
And didn't he say that there was still much great music that remained to be written in C major?
Yes, indeed. It's a wonderful thought.
Yeah.
But he didn't really care about that. What he cared about was Schoenberg, Arnold Schoenberg, will be alive in 100 years as the prophet of the great German masters.
Yes.
And of course, it's fantastic because the first thing Hitler did was to get him out of the Prussian Academy of Fine Arts with everyone else. And the poor guy was penniless, comes to America, where he does have his disciples, but he couldn't even get a Guggenheim grant in 1971.
Why?
1951.
Oscar Levant is someone that fascinates me. Why do you think someone like Oscar Levant would seek out the teaching of Schoenberg?
Because he was really much more of a musician than just the player of Rhapsody in Blue and Concerto in F.
Yes.
To pop pieces to Webern or Stravinsky. They are, delicious, as Rosenfeld said, they're delicious Miami hotels, marvelous,
That's how we characterize the Rhapsody in Blue and the Piano Concerto?
Yeah, they remind me of the lushness of remember at that time of Hollywood, of Miami's hotels. That was the place to go visit.
I know what they mean. Now, who said that?
Paul Rosenfeld,
Okay.
probably the best music critic of his age.
Do you share that feeling about them? They seem broader in their implications.
Well, they are broader in their implications because I think he truly understood what melody could do.
Yes.
I mean, remember, the real mystery of man, one philosopher said, is that he can write a melody. That's bigger than anything.
Yes.
You're not going to go home and listen to Schoenberg's string trio.
Well, that's what I was asking. I have a deep respect, notwithstanding what I've said,
I do
for Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex. But I don't crave it as I do Gershwin's Piano Concerto. So how can I...
What piano concerto?
Gershwin's Piano
Oh,
Concerto.
no, absolutely. That's a glamorous Hollywood production.
Yes,
Its
it is.
descendant is the Tarantulela of Messiaen.
Also, I mean, I don't fail to hear it as soon as I walk out on the West End Avenue right here.
Yeah.
It just absolutely resounds with it's almost to borrow from you, a kind of a vanished age that I would do anything I could to clutch onto it.
Oh, absolutely. The aura of the Rhapsody in Blue, just that opening clarinet solo for 30 seconds is more than Webern could ever ask for in talent, you see, in the sense of communication with the crowd.
Well, see, that leads me to a question. We were talking earlier today about romance. Why, this is outside of the consideration of 20th century music and what it would allow to persevere. But if we have something like the Gershwin Piano Concerto, which I would feel was one of my great, great teachers on how I was going to conduct myself romantically. And by that, I mean that it seemed to instruct through melody, through very choice bits of the piano as a kind of solitary figure pitted against the orchestra, how a romantic person was going to approach the way that conduct with a woman enchants all objects around them. So what I would like to know is...
Gershwin would love to have heard you, because he was very much into the beauty of women.
Absolutely. So why do you think our 20th century decided it was not going to permit the perpetuation of that kind of teaching? I feel it was of great value to me, because even in the failure of romance, I feel that the failure still leaves the enchantment that was there because of the teachings of that kind of music. Do you agree that, in a sense, it's always arguing a kind of romance that can't really be realized because, well, a marriage would kill it? So it's always a kind of prelude, a perpetual preluding that he's citing. And what I would love to know is, why could a country such as ours, that could engender that in the little boy who, while he was on roller skates, heard what the romance of Rubinstein from a machine in a Nickelodeon, and then transmogrify all of that into this great romantic sensibility? Why do we not permit that as a continued means of instruction for the young man's heart?
Well, I'll ask you, why do you think so? Because your opinion will be interesting.
I don't think women permit it anymore, because I think they think somehow that it has to be dismissed because it's no longer the kind of exchange that is being demanded. I don't know what's being asked for, because if that's removed, then romance simply is a transaction. It's how much can I assure someone else, a woman, of what I can give them materially, even though feminism is arguing that they should come into the compact with the same ability to provide for themselves, so that you would think all that would be left is the romance. And yet that has been harpooned. So I would like to know what's left when the teaching was so great that I can't believe, if the needle were to drop on the Gershwin Piano Concerto, that it wouldn't reform the masses. And yet I can't imagine how people survive without love songs, but they do. So I'm not sure what the...
They do now, in a very tragic sense, not only for music, which, pop music was never at its absolute best at all times. I mean, Gershwin's songs still remain immortal.
Yes, they are.
And others, but Berlin, on and on. They're fantastic, and I always notice in me how many popular songs exist.
Yes.
And I wish that I could sing them better, but anything from "Be My Love," Mario Lanza. It used to. I would hear it in the radio. I would come down from my grandparents who lived. The tenor voice was so glamorous, so incredible, but the tune, that major seventh, that just drove me crazy.
Well, you talk about how at the end, or in the end of your Steinway Basement essay, which is in the New Criterion, you cite the song of Cole Porter, So in Love Am I.
What a piece.
And that's why I think those songs were so grand, because the little r, romance, meaning man and woman, is being served, but there's also an implication of a greater sense of romance, because you're implying that the romantic impulse is now being broadened. It's not just going to be crushed by the end of a romance, but it's applied, in that case, to the object of an instrument.
Yes.
The love you felt for the right piano that you had chosen for your radio station.
Yes, and that unconscious singing of that tune, right, at the end of that article that I did for the New Criterion, was also something that went beyond the idea of classical music, or putting it into this was making me feel just as good as a Chopin nocturne, or whatever.
Yes, and see, now here's where I am. I'm going to sound like a hick, even though I've studied Western music formally. I agree with you that the best of arts cannot be yoked to each other. So that the art of prosody, of writing music for poetry, one side or the other is going to suffer. However, I must say, Tin Pan Alley, I think, may have had an apotheosis of uniting in certain moments the idea of intervals and words in such a way that I think it led a culture to regard, and again, this may destroy me in terms of the way people think of the way I think of women in what's supposed to be a feminist 21st century, but to regard women as something precious in terms of the way we engage in a romantic choreography, which is not to the sense that it's an exchange either sexually or monetarily in her case, but the elevation of all nature because of the prelude that is never quite reached as we admire the other person. And that kind of music seemed to do that and united it with words. You just mentioned also with intervals, you mentioned a major seventh. And isn't even that the interval? Here I'm talking a lot about the Gershwin Piano Concerto. That's one of the very first things that happens in that wonderful plaintive solo piano part that comes in the beginning. Are these intervals that are so united to words to a degree in the way we feel words.
Yes. Yeah. What you've said is so many things to talk about. Notice one important thing called survival. The Gershwin Concerto, Rhapsody in Blue, I always used to say to my students, you better learn the Rhapsody in Blue, it'll pay your rent someday.
Yes.
Or Tchaikovsky Concerto or whatever. The point is that this music drives people into the state of nostalgia. They will remember their girlfriend when they were a 12-year-old boy. This is not too early to say that the male is already producing his romantic genetic thing going on. He wants to spread his genes into the world. So he's very romantic. Biology made him, to me, far more romantic than a woman.
Yes.
A woman is very cautious. Well, I mean, they have been made so by men in many ways, or they had chastity belts, or they were considered property, or they were weaker, so they had many problems to contend with. But the male was definitely romantic. He doesn't want his woman touched by any man. He wants that virginity. Bell, the biographer of Virginia Bell's, anyway, he wrote saying, he said there were two indispensable things of the 19th century for women. They had to play the piano and they had to be virgins. Well, think if you weren't a virgin, I mean, you had no chance on that marketplace. And if you were then going to be a governess, you're going to be a prostitute. So women have had a lot to overcome. They did. They wanted suffrage. They got it. So they have a vote. Big deal, right? But slowly but surely, they got what they wanted. And now they're the CEO and they will be the presidents of the United States. Maybe eventually the Pope. Who knows?
But it's funny, we were talking about Oscar Levant. I know that Oscar Levant has the crack that he knew Doris Day before she was a virgin, which I always think is funny. But what he's also saying is that the potentiality of the romantic impulse that men feel can elevate that sense of the divine exchange that is above a mere exchange
Absolutely.
of buying into a literal virgin. So what I want to know, you just mentioned all of the places to which a woman can ascend. Do you think, to a degree, I think so, and maybe, again, makes this me an old caveman, that perhaps the price has been too great, that the loss of a society that guides itself by a Gershwin Piano Concerto in favor of a society that feels that we ostensibly have to simply come together almost as androgynous, non-sexualized beings that see no moonlight, is too great a price to pay.
It's too great a price to pay. The romantic instinct must exist even until old age. I tell all of my people in the evening division that that, take my class every Tuesday. All of them are old, many.
Yes.
And you must not extinguish that little fire. There's a man and a woman that have just gotten together, basically, as lovers who are in their 80s. Wonderful, wonderful. It has transformed both of them. You should see the glow of the skin of this woman. It's like she is lost from 88 to 68 or whatever. It doesn't matter what, ages or numbers. The point is that she's now living a life of the romance that she had hoped for and never received. And she now feels fortunate with it. And the man is so proud of her. This is very beautiful to see. That doesn't mean that there are not marvelous marriages. There's one of two people that have been with me for 35 years. He was a great surgeon and she's a great music lover, and they lived in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania somewhere, and he had a hospital, and she decided she can't take the marriage the way it was, and they would only stay because they were fortunate enough to have enough money to have an apartment in New York City. So he would work his whole, maybe years. And they also had concerts there. I remember giving one, and the governor of the state, the former state, he ran for president. He was a well-known, doesn't matter, but yes, the name of the city, yes. Anyway, so they for years had this wonderful, and still do, marriage where she was left alone to do her operas and hear what she wanted, and he did his medical thing, and they had children, and the children loved them the same. I mean, absolutely amazing when I look at them, the love they have. I say it was because they were not together every minute.
Well, I understand.
Yeah.
Please understand that I don't mean that I don't think there can be a world where a woman can be president or can be a doctor or any of those things.
Of course, yes.
What I want to know is, why does that world seem to eliminate from the man the set of rules by which he could follow the moonlight of a Gershwin piano concerto?
Yeah.
Because I find when I employ those things, it's as if I'm taking steps in a ritual that delay a step that could be taken immediately. It's as if the choreography of the ballet is no longer required. So I want to know, what dance are people performing? None. So how do we reconcile this ostensible equality with no set of rules to follow in our conduct, which is still decreed by nature, should have some kind of dance?
Absolutely, had to have the dance and the courtship dance.
And is that why these kinds of popular songs, the Cole Porters, the Gershwins, the Rodgers and Hart, and then the art music that can reflect it? I mean, I feel that in the very bones of a Rachmaninoff piece. I don't think anyone doesn't have those associations to a degree from that kind of music.
Well, he's one of the great melody makers,
yes.
Mr. Rachmaninoff, and he has a great friend called Mettner, who's a
yes.
marvelous melody maker, but not as great as him.
No, yes.
You see, and there's the difference.
Yes, I mean, the piano textures of Mettner are unbelievable.
Marvelous, and also he's a great, wonderful melody maker, but not of Rachmaninoff's quality.
No.
Rachmaninoff will just hit you in the belly. He
yes.
just, he just takes over your being. Full Moon and Empty Arms.
Yes.
I don't mind when I hear that, Rachmaninoff tune in my Full Moon and Empty Arms. And I remember how disappointed I was that we got to the moon. I said, no more lunar rainbows, no more romance. The moon was everything. I walk down the streets of Manhattan. I see nobody looking at the moon, which is far more beautiful than they are.
I understand.
There is no rules. They were 3,000, 5,000 years of male rules, how to treat a woman. Much of it bad, much of it's romantic. They are your romantic image. They are your concept of physical beauty.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the range that man can have. I mean, a man can see a beautiful man and also understand the physicality of beauty. I'm just talking of the simple-minded
Right.
in our age man and woman. And the woman is very careful to make sure that if she gets pregnant, that man's main issue is not his physical beauty or his strength or even his finances. It will be that he will be there to help take care of the offspring. If he's bored, as many men are, they will disappear. You know what the statistics are weekly of how many men disappear from the family mold? Thousands of them just disappear, never to be seen again with new names.
Well, in part, could that not be because we've removed the mythological imperative of reminding ourselves how we got to that point? And
Well,
so I would like to know how
we
can we
lost it,
finally reconcile those two things?
We will
can't-
not. We will not any longer, ever again.
So we live in a society where men have to surrender these rules,
Yes,
And
and they
yet
are.
the-
They are. They're.
and yet then we reproach them for not knowing how to conduct themselves when they have no myth to live by.
Yes, it's a society like the Gertrude Stein. You know, it's yes and no and no and yes, and you know the 17th century had this, but didn't have the reasonableness. Everything now is a large mishmash of people not playing by rules. Look at our politics. There's no rules, no gallantry for a man to a woman. I opened the door for a student and she looked at me like I was crazy. This is the beginning of the end of the concept of good manners.
Yes.
And wow, what you still say, and it's on the news, and there were 30,000 people killed, including men and children. That's from an old time.
Well, how was it that people in the past or that there were women, individual women, and I think there are individual women now who don't need this kind of body of a movement
No.
to say that I am a feminist or I am this or that they are simply who they are, who would not confound gallantry with condescension. And why is that? You say that in holding the door for someone, they were puzzled. I think now maybe perhaps a woman is trained to think that holding the door or the proverbial idea of putting one's coat across a muddy puddle, which I think is probably antiquated, but you understand.
It's antiquated, but it was great.
Yes, it was. At somewhere along the line, I just suspect, and this is just from my still being out there as a single man, that women now confound that gesture with an attempt to reclaim a condescension, when I think all that it means, if they can be told that they're encountering someone with a romantic sensibility that's generated by listening to a Gershwin or a Rachmaninoff or 19th century sensibilities, is that one is looking at the woman as a kind of lens that ennobles all of creation around one. How can we restore that except to listen to pieces that, in a sense, have the poetry of earth, unceasing in their tonalities? So I think maybe that's where I was getting with our conversation about Stravinsky, that at the price of perhaps hammering away at hackneyed parts of the repertoire, maybe we have to fight for them even more, even though I think a lot of pianists think, wow, the repertoire is limited to the second piano concerto of Rachmaninoff, or that one's rent can only be paid by the Rhapsody in Blue. It seems as if the lessons of those things have still been wrested from us. Because I knew I used to listen to those things and almost make resolutions of conduct based upon what I heard in these abstract works of art, on how I thought an elevated act of chivalry would not be an act of condescension, but
Absolutely.
but a profession of how sacred something that nature would tell me to behold is beautiful, that how could I express it to that person except by acts of gallantry? So I think I don't know how to reconcile these things.
Well, there's not going to be an easy answer on this one, because we're at this moment too far gone into the correctness and into the illegitimacy of almost everything we say.
You mean in terms of having to check one's words? Because you and I were even talking about, let's say, usage in an essay that you were speaking to me earlier today
Yes.
about the use of the word mankind.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think that's a condescension to women. I think, in a sense,
Exactly. You said it to me right back. The sentence I was talking about was mankind, and you said, I said it should be humankind, right? And he says, no, there is a great literary tradition in the word mankind. Of course, when I grew up, I never said humankind. It sounds a little bit like a worm.
well, yes, and in fact, I think that's where condescension creeps in. If I were to put that in my prose, I would immediately think, okay, someone has dodged millenniums
Right.
of the beauty of prose,
Right.
of the rhythms of Shakespeare, where the word mankind can appear and not have it be a condescension, but an invocation of our heritage. So I think the only condescension is to try to adapt to these terrible political correctnesses.
You must really not. I don't even. Fortunately, I know nothing about grammar, so I don't even know the definition of a pronoun. But I do say I'm glad. I'm glad that the writer today is not who's a male writing away, and everyone's she. It used to confuse me very much when they.
Of course, it's confusing. It doesn't make sense.
No, they don't want it to make sense. They're into a newism.
Yes.
I would like the word feminism to be put away. I'm a feminist. You're a feminist. You have to be the male that's a feminist.
Well, I respect women that I respect. I don't know that I respect the body, the half of the body of civilization that is woman, just because it's woman. But any individual.
I have always respected women because, to me, they are this romantic personality.
Yeah.
They are more than my mother. They are my continuation if I wanted it.
Yes.
And they are my sense of touch. Everything is embodied into the heart of a woman and her physical beauty. As Krishnamurti said, we see physical beauty through the concept of a woman.
Yes.
And when we see well, I can tell you that you said, oh yes, something results from even the love of a woman. I remember I'm a young boy, and I see a movie at age 5 or 6. My parents take me to a movie. It was a double feature. Had no idea what I would be going through.
Was this Rita Hayworth?
Rita Hayworth.
All right.
How did you know?
Because I think I am starting to know you well.
Okay. I can tell you I could not believe this Rita Hayworth. And I saw no other person in it.
Mm.
And I remember coming back in the car. I was in the back, and I was so mad that I was a little boy because I wanted Rita Hayworth in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, said nothing. My mother said, well, how did you like Fred Astaire? Because Fred Astaire was in both movies.
Yes.
Who's Fred Astaire? I don't care about him. I didn't watch him.
Mm-hmm.
Only her. I'll never forget this day, 5 years old. The second movie, I went to the bathroom, came back. I was like in a state of true shock.
Mm.
I was sitting, remember, we didn't have the little televisions. We had the movie theater, the silver screen.
Yes.
And I was very close. And my eyes just couldn't stop drinking her in. When I'm 12 or something, or 13 or 15, I'm in love with Brigitte Bardot. I say, hey, there's the first modern woman. I want to know her. Oh, she has a boyfriend, someone said, who's a guitarist. I said, well, I'm going to give up the piano. I'm going to start the guitar. Because already in my mind, I'm trying to think of the seduction of Brigitte Bardot. Because the male has to think of the seduction. I'm not interested in Adam. I am interested in Eve. I don't care what she did.
Right.
I love Eve. And I instantly will see Eve, in the paint strokes of Botticelli.
Well, then, in the 20th century, for all the talk of feminism, do we Adams, however, not record the price that we pay, even in creating great art, in trying to woo Eve, in paying the price for her delivering the apple to us? So What I mean is that, though I would still lobby for the Gershwin Piano Concerto as a set of rules by which to follow, is there something that one should also preach to the young man of its dangers, that though we need that set of gallantry rules, is it a double-edged sword?
Yes, it is, and it's up to the young man to become truly full of strength and go for it, as they say today. You cannot not be romantic if you are a male. You can't just stop the courtship dance. You are going to be so repressed. I used to pay for some of my students to have dates. Go, there's a movie right now on Glen Gould down the street at 30 Lincoln Plaza. Here's the money, and take her to anywhere, Burger King, wherever you want afterwards. Talk to her, because I asked this girl in the class, how would you like to have a date with so and so? I would. Did you ever have a date? 5 years of Juilliard, never had a date. It was not unusual.
I understand.
Okay, next week I come back. Did you have a good time at the? He didn't go. He couldn't do it.
Oh.
Gave me back the money. He couldn't go. He couldn't take away the time from his specialty. This is tragic. Does this man not look at this girl and say, well, even if I didn't care for her in this chemistry way, wouldn't it be fun to talk to a fellow pianist?
Sure. Now, do you think, in a sense, that his devotion to the representation of the romantic was so intense that it was more important to remain devoted to that than to the object that could inspire the representation?
No, he had no idea that the repertoire he plays is the romantic repertoire.
So this is just a case of a personal failing in this.
No. Hundreds and hundreds upon hundreds of young people do not give themselves any possibility of romance, even though they're playing Chopin nocturnes.
Okay, then how do you account for the fact if there are people who are highly exposed to that code, who you would think have reams of guidebooks in their minds of gallantry?
No.
That it's not, that they too are not following it. So I would like to know then, what's happened?
Many of them come from Asian countries, many of the pianists of our time, and they necessarily were under dictatorships. One day Mao said, if you play a scale on the piano or any Western, and if your neighbor reports you, we're going to crush your hands. They did. They did. 5 days later, he has a new law where suddenly there's Yellow River piano, and they're selling them by the thousands, you see. That means repression. If this boy is told by the parents that everything Western counts, you want to be an ice skater, I don't care what you are, the parents said. Be a pianist, be an ice skater, be a basketball player, doesn't matter, just win the competitions and be good and be famous. Wow, this is a great strength. The parents had great, they didn't have any life of their own. They were restricted to one child only, right?
Okay.
If you know the manners of Japanese, it's not going to be easy for them to play dun 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 dun.
Okay.
It's not going to be easy for them to be Leonard Bernstein on the podium. You see, it's just not. Ozawa had it, but how many others? None. Maybe one or two. But we're talking about the temperament unleashed in Western art. Now you have a pope that's called Leo the 14th, right? He became pope yesterday, an American pope. I wish him good luck. I say he has an illustrious name, and I hope that he does for the arts the same as Pope Leo the 10th did for Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo, working in the Vatican in the same year. Think of that. Well, I challenged our new pope, the new pope of the world. I wanted that job, by the way.
Okay.
to do for the arts what is now necessary. Put some of that church billions into commissioning incredible things, even if it goes back to naive religious art. Well, I'll be glad to do a sculpture of the Christ.
I understand. Well, then that brings us full circle to where the reading began our discussion today. And so maybe I'll ask a question back to you. Everything now that what we've discussed today, do you think that we live in the best of all possible worlds? Or
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
I know that you can't, it's hard for it because I'm complaining about everything all the time.
No, I just thought it would be a good way to bookend our discussion today to ask you again whether or not, I don't hear it as complaint. I just think that you note things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you're,
yes, I think I note things, yes.
And you just take care to observe.
Yeah, observation is not one of our big things today, you know.
Also, I think to your credit, you are not inhibited in making observations of what you note.
Well, I don't know why anyone should be.
I don't
isn't
either.
Isn't that a natural instinct almost?
I think it is, but you're one of the few who I think permit themselves that freedom.
I hope not, because then I'll have nobody to talk to but you.
Well,
and I want our people that are watching to subscribe to this.
Yes.
This wonderful, I think, conversation that touches much more than these usual political things that we go on and on day and night about. You know, they're ephemera compared to the fact that this Pope should be getting those billions of dollars into artists in Peru. He likes Peru, right? He's a double. So get some Peruvian artists to do some incredible murals, or build it's a lot of space in the world. Let's build a magnificent city.
Or frankly, David, the currency that I feel gets pumped into me every time I speak to you is on the range of the individual level. That you always remind me of the currency of art and music and literature and how it affects my own conduct, that these things are still absolutely vital today and they're not historical. So I think maybe our conversations are distinguished from others in that respect, that I don't think we're invoking these things for the sake of a mere pedantic reference to people's
Certainly
knowledge.
Not one of self-love. I'm not talking about late Stravinsky, not for someone to maybe be intrigued with what I said about the 12-tone method of Schoenberg being entranced into a new form of Stravinsky type music, which is very fascinating and moving.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. You reminded me, and you're sending me home to reconsider Stravinsky in the light of my own personal perception of the cosmos around me, because I usually only invoke all these things on how, and this is where we began too, that there's the body of work that an artist creates, but perhaps the greater body of work is the life that one creates. So what I'm just saying, in our conversations, I always feel that it reinforces not so much the body of work I create, but how I'm going to conduct my own life.
And he conducted it through his music with a scrupulousness that was the same as he conducted his life. Even though life is a very messy thing and a Stravinsky manuscript is not.
No, the orthography is beautiful.
Phenomenal, man, phenomenal. One of those late works, the 7 movements for piano and orchestra. Just, I mean, this man is moving around tones in a new way for him, that's given him a new vocabulary and given us a new vision of the way tones can be colored in a Stravinskyan way. So different than Schoenberg's very Germanic type of work. Yes. I think that, you know, we have to always, as we have been, work around our discussion, because the arts are, to me, the most vital thing in the world, and they remain so. And how can I just say 19th century when I really have been working on an Argentine piano sonata from 1940, which I have loved for 30 years. I haven't conquered it yet because I don't need to.
What piece is that?
The sonata by Luis Geneo, probably an Italian family that had migrated to Argentina,
Okay.
you know, in the 20s or so. he became an important composer in Argentine life. There's more than one composer. It's not only Ginastera.
Mhm.
He was equal to him.
Okay.
Well, he didn't get the same publicity. When I said to Luigi Zanninelli, the Italian-American composer, whose music is fantastic, and no one plays it. Of course, he writes out of the spirit of his great talent. But I said, how come these great Italians, forgetting Vivaldi, but from Albinoni, the tremendous violin school of the Italian 18th century. I mean, nothing is played. It's just because nobody wrote biographies of them.
Mm.
It's interesting too.
Mhm.
The Germans wrote about every composer while they were alive. Beethoven already had biographies written about him when he was alive. Lord Byron had, before his Don Juan and later in his work, he was already,
Mhm.
talked about. We have so many things to look at that it's almost not a disgrace to say I can't get to it.
Yes.
I don't, and in my case, I don't have the time to write a biography of some artist if I knew how to write a biography or if it interested me. But if it did interest me, I would write a biography of someone that I liked.
Yes. Mhm.
There are certain composers that Gershwin needs a revised and realistic one.
For a biography.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
There was a man dying at 38?
Mm.
What a tragedy for the world. No life, no art, no life. I mean, this man left us 5-6 serious works, each one from the Cuban Overture to American in Paris. What really made Gene Kelly, that movie? You
Yes.
see that American Paris is a fantastic work.
It
It
is.
has only one rival, the Harlem by Duke Ellington.
Mm.
Fantastic piece too, but nothing of Ellington is played by symphony orchestras. Not even that anymore. Look at Varese. How could you not like his Désert? I mean, it has exquisiteness in it, even with its electronic.
Mhm.
The poem electronique made for the 1958 World's Fair in Belgium, in Brussels. Why can't these works fascinate you without you having to drool over a melody?
Mm.
I am so happy to see the 7-Year Itch. When I see Marilyn Monroe, the fantasy of all humanity,
Okay.
man, woman, beast, coming through the wall, when he decides, no, Stravinsky, no. Oh, that'll scare her.
Right.
He's talking about the Rite of Spring or something, which wouldn't scare anyone anymore. And here she comes, and the greatest sex symbol, I hate that word, but there she comes, dawdling down, and she can play it again, play it, keep going, whatever it is. It's so sexual. But Rachmaninoff's music comes through way above even Marilyn Monroe.
It does.
And that's crazy looking
Or-
Tom Ewell.
Or what it does to a degree is teach the young man how to regard Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
And I think it elevates the image to what I was talking about earlier. That it, again, leaves one with a sense of how the music can elevate this thing that is no longer just looked at as an object, but something that emanates a power then that elevates all other objects.
Yes.
And I think that's been taken away from the young man in terms of his engagement with a feminist society in which he can no longer practice his chivalry.
Yes. And I'm not, so happy about the feminist who says, "Oh, look at her skirt going up with the subway,"
Well, that's strange because in riding here on the subway to see you, yes, I've heard, maybe women can complain on how someone like a Marilyn Monroe is rendered to an object, but I see girls on the subway that are practically just wearing their underwear.
Yeah.
And yet no one remarks on that.
No one remarks on these short shorts.
Yeah.
No one remarks on the fantastic amount of tattoos on these women's sometimes shapely legs that ruin them.
Yes.
But here's Marilyn Monroe. We're ending today's YouTube broadcast. We're ending with one of the great symbols of, no matter what kind of romance it is, it was put together in that film by the man who wrote the great so-called Hollywood Concerto, which is so far beyond the Hollywood Concerto.
Yes.
It's still magnificent in its piano writing and in every measure. And here she is coming through and bless her, because in real life, let's face it, she came along too late for anyone to respect her. She was brutalized over and over in her life by men.
Well, that may have been the case, but in terms of her rendering in art, she seems to resemble to me what the intention of the piano concerto of Rachmaninoff is.
Oh, it is.
Which is infinite application, meaning I don't look at the concerto like I don't look at her as merely an object that is circumscribed by its own boundaries. It's beautiful in the sense that it can be infinitely applied. The Rachmaninoff concerto survives its use in the 7-Year Itch, which is fun, but you're right, it has a dated quality and to a degree it's silly. But I can then
But I love it.
Right, and then, however, I can put on a recording of the concerto by the most serious artist, and there it is, again, refreshed in the most abstract way.
Absolutely.
So
The word interpretation itself.
and that, I think that's what I've been trying desperately to say today in terms of what I have perceived are the dangers of feminism in always saying that feminine beauty is to render it into an object, because the object of the romantic piano concerto, in a sense, is infinitely applicable. It elevates every other object that I find is within its range. So does it for feminine beauty to a man who I think is trained toward gallantry. He doesn't just see an object, he sees something that radiates beyond his boundaries.
Of course, that movie is 70 years ago, and much has changed and has changed, but you would not see Rock Hudson or Clark Gable come through the wall, who also was tremendously magnetic, or Gregory Peck.
Mm-hmm.
You would never say, oh, he's going to sit down next to Ewell while the Rachmaninoff the flowering of the theme comes, you know. You know what I'm saying? This is a woman's role. What is wrong with a role?
That's what I don't understand.
It exists in nature.
And it has great power.
Yes, we've lost that power.
Right, and again, I'm not talking about what her life was off screen. I'm talking about her as a image, how it was used. It has great power to me that comes at us through the sexual, but then it broadens. Again, I think of the Rachmaninoff concerto in this respect. I don't know how you feel about the Karajan Alexis Weissenberg version of the Rachmaninoff Second.
Oh, I think it's wonderful.
And yet, do you agree it's treated with an absolute grim seriousness?
Yes.
Such that even though the text is very finite, it's the same notes that is being rendered by the pianist who plays it in the 7-Year Itch, but it sounds like a whole other tremendous grim manifesto that's still romantic. So what I mean is that Marilyn Monroe, to the man who has the chivalrous training, has that same latitude of the instructive to how we look at nature. And I think that so long as feminism denies the chivalrous man the ability to look at woman as a creation of nature that is infinitely beautiful, if that is taken away from him, we lose way more than we gain.
Yes. Can you imagine Joe DiMaggio must have been highly confused in marrying this, great symbol of sexuality, eroticism. He must have been very confused, but part of him, and the part that she went to, was the gallantry he had on the baseball field, which was very masculine gallantry toward almost like I'm the great bullfighter, and this is Yankee Stadium. And
Yes.
he would always, after a home run, do something with his hat or some. Thank you, audience. Thank you. He was a very romantic man then. And obviously, she was highly attracted to the playwright. What's his name? The
Arthur Miller.
Arthur Miller. I don't know why, because I didn't care for his New York accent, frankly. But that's one of the thousands of prejudices I adore. But and probably I was jealous.
Okay.
I wanted to write a play like that, but no, he didn't do very well by her.
Mm.
He didn't do well in the play he wrote and all that. The point is that Gershwin's concerto began and that concerto could have done just as well in that movie as the Rachmaninoff. Don't you think so? They both have that glamorous look.
They do. Mm-hmm.
And remember what Sacheverell Sitwell said. Liszt had the glamorous eye, Paganini the evil eye.
Mm.
And the instruments differ.
They do, and it's hard to not go down the path in this conversation toward what you have just suggested with Liszt, because there's such a complexity there. There is the amorous eye of Liszt, and yet his amorous eye universally applies. I believe that the child Liszt wept before Catholic iconography.
Oh, yes.
I believe he's serious. I don't think that's just a mere part of the lore, and hence I'm no creditable Catholic at all. I understand it, however, when I think of it through Liszt. I mean, you have talked about how Catholicism is probably the most romantic conception in terms of the ritual of formalized religion, and I come to it most faithfully through Liszt. So in a sense, if we go again back to Marilyn Monroe, there's a kind of iconography that leads beyond the object to a universal use of the amorous eye.
Yes.
And I think, for me, as a man who's still single out there, that the inability to be attracted to the beauty of woman through the amorous eye is thwarted when the intimation is that feminist mantra suggests that it has to first be approached as if the equality is so great that I can't see that beauty.
Tragedy.
Yes.
It will strike in every one of those instances because there can never be equality among two, let alone among the whole.
Yeah.
The whole. The only thing that you can know for sure that is a whole is the piano's keyboard.
Yes.
7 1/3 octaves says everything in music.
Mm-hmm.
Everything can be transcribed no matter what to the piano, unless it's far out. I think we've had a great time.
I do.
Give me the hand again.
Thank you, David. Honored, and if the question of as to whether or not this is the best of all possible worlds is left unsettled, I will still say that you always leave me with the impression that it most certainly is after we converse.
Well, it is today.
Thank you, David.
And please, as they say, tune in. Is that still used?
I suppose so.
Well, please listen next week again. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you tell your neighbors. I'm after 1 billion people listening, and I'm sure that we'll get that soon.
I'm confident.
In the meantime, thank you so much.
Thank you.